Hello, hello. What's going on? We're back for another live streamed episode. I like doing these lives because, I love podcasting, but what I love more is being able to have conversations with people. So I do these lives with guests, of course, because I could talk, I did it for the first time over the past summer. It was nice, get to share everything I have on my mind, but I really love having conversations with people because I think when you do have these conversations, it helps to broaden your perspective on things. But even more so, I love doing these live because it gives the opportunity for y'all to be a part of the conversation as well. Right now, we're live streamed. So if you're catching this live, please let me know if you are on the live chat or if you're on the replay squad. We'd love to see where you're at as well because since I've been doing these, I started to have some people from all over the world. I think I had some like Dutch viewers, had some people in Africa. Um, Not Asia yet, but we're gonna go there. There's black people everywhere, and also just people who are here for these conversations around the world, whether they're allies or just people who are curious in what we're talking about. This conversation is one that it's really inspired by the now, but it's something. It's not new. It's not new, but I think it's one that needs to happen consistently, right? We're at the end of Black History Month, and this has been a very interesting one, y'all. There's been a lot of surprises stuff that's going on. We just go back to Martin Luther King Day, which was shared with the inauguration day, absolutely wild. To Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance, unexpected, but I loved it. Not everyone did, but that doesn't really matter. He did it, and he did what he came to do, and it was beautiful. But something from that performance kind of reminded me of what got me into creating content. And what I felt from it was kind of like disruption, right? There's someone I like to work with, and Chris Ward Jr., he's a storytelling coach, and he always talks about positive disruption. And I love that phrase. The first time I heard it being used was with him. And that's what that whole performance felt like, positive disruption, kind of bringing things front and center that you couldn't ignore it. And it kind of awoke something in me, right? And throughout the rest of this month, we're seeing different headlines about things like Black History Month no longer being celebrated in federal workplaces. Basically, this whole call to action for identity months to basically like they're just dead. In fact, there's someone who was quoted saying that identity months are a distraction. For those who aren't aware of what identity months are, it's essentially Black History Month. It's Pride Month. It's all cultural celebrations that are tied to identity. So it's getting crazy out here, but there's something very special about these, right? A lot of people are like, it doesn't matter. But these identity months are all about, yeah, celebrating culture and learning about culture, but also telling the stories of what happened, both positive, negative, all the things. But when we stop to, we'll remove the importance of these things, we start to lose some of what makes us special, what makes us unique, and this country is supposed to be a melting pot. So it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. So all of these different stories and headlines have been happening. I'm just like, yo, we need to have a discussion about this. And something I love about Black History Month is all the stories that are being told, shared, whether it's from our own family members or whether it's from seeing people share stories online. And I think something really beautiful has been happening the past, well, forever, but especially just the past few years, just seeing all the people that I start to meet as I continue on this creator journey who are using their creative talents to tell stories from our culture and from other cultures too. So I'm really, really excited to have this conversation, right? And really excited for y'all to be a part of it too. So as we're talking, please comment, join in along. I want y'all to be a part of this conversation. If you're catching it, the replay, just let me know if you're in the replay squad. We're going to engage with you too, because the conversation doesn't stop when we hit end. It's going to keep on going because the internet is forever. I want to shout out a few people. What's up, Stephanie Cole? What's going on? Thank you. Happy Thursday. Greetings from Harlem. What's up, Harlem? Appreciate y'all checking in. Paula, welcome to the live. Stephanie came on again. Say, yeah, we ready. We ready like Cool Whip, Walt. See what I did there. I'll see yourself out. Yeah, see yourself out, but come right back. Come right back. I'm excited to do this, right? And before I just go on a little bit longer, there's just a few things, right, that are just really interesting the past few weeks, right? Just with like this call of like the action for identity must be dead. I think it's kind of funny that there was still a Black History Month celebration at the White House, and at the celebration, there was an announcement of different statues to represent historical figures like Muhammad Ali, uh, people like Kobe Bryant and Harriet Tubman, and that looks like a win. It is a win. We should always celebrate our leaders, heroes, and celebrate our history. But I think these next 4 years are going to be very, very weird. And it's going to be really, really important for us all to pay attention to not just the headlines, but the stories behind the headlines, what's going on, and be very, very intentional about what's being told and what's being shared, because the stories are being written right now. Like what's happening right now is going to be learned, it's going to be shared years from now. And so, yeah, we just gotta be very intentional. Just pay a lot of attention. I keep on wanting to say you gotta stay woke, but we know it's going to bring out. I've let that's the new dog whistle. Every time we say woke, it's a new dog whistle for people. So, um, I want to get into this conversation now. I want to get into this conversation. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. I'm joined today by someone who I've had the privilege of getting to know over the past few years. A phenomenal podcaster. I mean, he's honestly like, I don't know if he's known by this, but I look at him as like the Beyonce of podcasting, because he's out here winning award after award after award, making everyone mad. They're like, oh, you won another one. Good for you. They're asking questions like, how do you do it? Teach me how. But I don't think they really pay attention to what he's doing in this podcast. My guest is Dominic Lawson. The first podcast I've heard from him was Black as America. That's not his first podcast. That's the one he was doing when I first met him, and that is phenomenal storytelling. It's absolutely incredible. Like every single, there's not a second wasted. You're sharing stories of people that you may have heard of or may not have, but you just learn so much more about them. So I'm bringing him on for this conversation because he's actively telling stories about our culture, and he's one of the people who are protecting the culture from erasure by just using his talent to share stories that aren't being shared in places like Florida. But I'm also bringing him on because he's been very vocal and active on just advocating for Black creators and Black storytellers, and letting it known when people are like, "Oh, they did it so well," it's like, "Yeah, don't forget that was a Black person who did it. Y'all said we couldn't do this, but we can." So I'm gonna bring him on. I could keep talking about forever, but welcome to the stage, Dominic Lawson. How you doing, man? Oh, you know what's funny? You muted right now. Rule number one. Rule number one. Um. Oh, and also, y'all, we're doing this live, y'all. You know what's funny about live? Things could go wrong at any moment. So, Dominic, I can't currently hear you. It's kind of crazy. Let me know in the chat if y'all could hear him. But meanwhile, while we figure that out, want to shout out Liam. I haven't seen you in a minute. We got to catch up. Appreciate you joining. Appreciate you joining. I'm excited about this live stream. And I'm also curious as well, y'all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, there
Yes,
we
I
go.
can.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome.
That was weird.
Um, that was weird. That's weird. The people, they don't want us to talk about this stuff. The
Yeah,
man
that's
is
what
so
it
rich.
is, man.
That's what it is.
It's Ron DeSantis, man. That's who it
Ron
is, trying to shut
DeSantis.
me up, man, down in Florida. So,
Shout out to Florida.
yeah, shout out to that.
Um, yeah. Real quick, everyone watching live and everything. Um, I want to, like I say, y'all are part of this conversation as well. And one thing I want to ask y'all, it's the end of Black History Month, whether you learn something this month or just something you just learned previously. I would love to hear something that you've learned about the culture, about our history, something that's really interesting. It could be an invention or just a moment. Just share a little something that you think everyone should want to know. And I'll circle back to that later, see what y'all type in the chat. Dominic,
Yeah, man.
um, so uh, you're an award-winning podcaster. I already mentioned, your podcast, Black is American. You're working on something else that's really, really cool. I'm excited, and we'll talk about it a little later.
Sure.
But something that maybe not everyone knows about you is that you did serve in the military as
I did.
well.
I did 5 years. 88
5
Mike,
years.
truck driver. Spent some time in the army. It's like podcasting is my love, and this that, and the other. But I think the most important thing I've ever done career wise is serve in the army, especially when you come from a place like Black America, and they like to throw this thing in your face, like, that black people hate this country and this and the other. Like, no, 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 no. Nobody love this country more than us. Especially when you consider everything that's been done to us from systemic racism and all the things. So no, don't come for that. But no, I definitely served 5 years in the army. It definitely informs the work and the discipline that I do in this podcasting game.
Man, well, first of all, thank you for your service.
Appreciate
I think it's really cool because on your podcast you do tell certain stories from, of course, history, but it involves certain military figures that we should all know.
that.
And I'm
Absolutely.
actually really curious, right? So when we talk about stories and everything,
Yeah.
we think about it like, oh, that's really cool to happen. It always feels kind of internal, like within us, we should know about what happened with our ancestors. But when it was replaced, but there was a moment, like a brief, like 2 days where it was announced that, lessons about the Tuskegee Airmen and the Wasp were gonna be removed from military training. Now, I like to think of multiple perspectives, so I think some people would ask, like, "Well, how important is that to military training?" I'm just kinda curious, in your time in the military and also your time as a historian, how important is learning about history to, like, someone who's just trying to be a soldier fighting today's problems?
It's the representation and the affirmation, right? When we tell the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, it's a reminder that like maybe there's a black kid in Kansas, maybe there's a black woman in Florida that wants to be a fighter pilot. But if you've never seen that blueprint, if you've never seen that trailblazing, right, you would think like, oh, well, I can't do that because black people don't do that. Like, how many times have we
Mhm.
said in our community, right, like, oh, black people don't do X, Y, Z, right? So when you take down that information, you're not only erasing the idea that it can happen for little black boys and little black girls spread across this country, you also take away the fact of just how dope the Tuskegee Airmen were, right? You're talking about a fighter group who didn't lose a major bomber in major combat, right? And we're talking about
Mhm.
hundreds and hundreds of missions that they've flown, right? So again, not only is it the affirmation of can you do it, but it's also the affirmation of like you come from a people who do it exceptionally well, right? And that is
Yeah.
why it's important for that information to be out there because like listen, you know, in black America, we tend to have excellence as the standard no matter what people like to lead you to believe, no matter what people want to kind of put out there, excellence is the standard in Black America. And so when you have the Tuskegee Airmen, when you have a guy on Bluford as the first astronaut, that is the representation of excellence being the standard. And one of the things that we try to preach on Black is America, and one of the things Coach Eddie Robinson, the famous Grambling State coach, was, is not a request; it's an expectation, right? Of that greatness. And so, nah, man, it's extremely important to have those conversations because if you want to have a dope military, you need Black America, point blank, period.
Mm, simple as that.
Point blank.
Something that I absolutely loved and also was kinda surprised, it got me thinking like, "Tyler Perry, you able
Mhm.
to do this all along?" Was the movie 6 8 on Netflix, and that
Absolutely.
was a movie where during World War II, basically it followed the story of the only women's army corps that of color who was stationed overseas to take on this task that was assigned for them to fail. It was something everyone else had failed at, and they were like, "All right, y'all want in? Go ahead, do this, and we can send y'all back." They kept them. They kept them because they accomplished well, I feel like that's a spoiler, but y'all should have seen it by now. It's a history lesson, go ahead. It's a beautiful story. They accomplished something that literally wasn't possible and without any resources. When Dominic's talking about excellence, that's what we're talking about.
Listen,
Um,
listen, man.
yeah,
Like, listen, from my mom, my grandmother, my aunties, my sisters, and my daughters, you want to get some shit done, put Black women in charge.
absolutely.
Listen, that's
That's
been
not a
my
question anymore.
That's been my experience. That's been my experience. So when you talk about the 6 8 8, it's like, yeah, maybe other people were surprised and shocked that they got this done, but that's been my story. Like, black
Mhm.
women get shit done. Point blank period.
Yo, shout out to all the 92 percenters.
Correct.
Appreciate y'all.
1000%.
1,000%. So let's just dive into it even more. Role of Black storytellers, right? So I think like I got to interview someone years ago named Thondo Kafele. He's known as the King of Locks. Um, that was such a great interview. And he is a loctician, but what he calls himself is a self-esteem specialist. And what he loves to be able to do people's hair and then helping them to find the beauty in themselves and see themselves as something beautiful. And something he says that stuck out to me forever is that when it comes to progress, right? Everyone has a role to play. And we always think about, or at least I don't hear this as much, but when I was growing up, it was a lot of conversations around like, oh, who's the next Dr. King? We need another Malcolm X. But when I think about like what it really takes to continue to evolve as a society and create a self-sustaining culture and community, I just keep thinking about what Kafeli shared, which was that everyone has a role to play. And I think that a role that is often celebrated, but um it's not always thought about as far as like who do we need in order to continue to grow our storytellers. And right now I think we need them more than ever to preserve our history and our culture, because we're living in a time where there's literal policies, executive orders
Right.
going into place to you know erase our history.
Right.
So I'm really curious for your perspective, right? You already talked about like the importance of like keeping stories and military training, but what makes storytelling so powerful in preserving our history?
It's powerful because of how it makes us feel. It's a reminder of what we come from, what we are capable of, and what we have always continued to do. The from podcasters to YouTubers to TikTokers now, we are the new age griots, right?
Mm,
That is what we are. That is the role we serve. And listen, I think maybe there have been times, and I don't mean this in a bad or malicious way, but I think there have been times where we've taken our stories for granted. Oh, it's
mm,
February. It's Black History Month. Okay, let's roll out Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and Frederick Douglass. Right, the holy trinity of Black history. Right,
that's dope.
let's roll them out. But I think now with podcast and YouTube and TikTokers and Instagrammers and stuff like that, we're able to find these little known stories, and we're able to find that like you don't necessarily have to be the great orator of a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X. You don't have to be this great baseball player like Jackie Robinson. No, you can be the everyday person who goes on their job, and from time to time maybe you do some meetings about like how we need to organize it, all those things. Like that's where revolutions happen. It's not at the great lectern, right? It's in the everyday struggle. It's in the everyday minutia of doing the work. And so storytellers play that role, right? Uh,
Hmm.
One of the things that I often do with Black as America is partner with museums, and I had the phenomenal opportunity uh, to work with Carl Westmoreland. Carl Westmoreland was the senior historian at the National Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I interviewed him with him and worked with him on the very first episode of Blacks America, where we featured John Fox because he was from that area, so he can give me some insight
Hmm.
into his story. And when we finished that interview, he was like, "You know what? This is amazing, right? Like, when I was coming up and we was doing this history thing and this and the other, and we had to go to the library and find it and go and share this information. But now with podcasting and stuff like that, like it's phenomenal, and I'm so glad that you reached out to me. Now, since then, Mr. Westmoreland unfortunately has passed away, but in that conversation, Walter, it felt like a passing of the torch. It felt like, young man, I see what you're doing. I endorse it. It's a new way. It's a new age. Go forth. You have my blessing. And so when you have a conversation and a experience like that from the ancestors and ancestors before, and have this almost spiritual experience, it impresses on you this responsibility. Like, we have to keep telling these stories. I was getting ready to end Black is America after season 3 because I wanted to work on some other projects, and the older black woman's like, "No, you don't. You you will not. You
Why you gotta do that?
Right. You will not. Like, this is too important. This is too important." And so clearly she saw something in the water, because if it's so important now, right? They're trying to rewrite history and burn books and say, no, they weren't enslaved, they were workers, right? Where the damn chick at? Because I mean, 'cause listen, workers get checks, right? You know,
Health benefits,
man, listen,
PTO,
like life insurance or something, right?
some.
But no, it's just one of those things where, as storytellers, it's not just telling these stories; it's a responsibility to keep these stories going. Again, like I said, we are the new generation of griots, and as you know, I think I saw a news article that talked about 2025. All kids, born in 2025, they will know nothing but AI. I can't wait to pass that torch to whatever they're
Mm.
going to do with it, right? And so, again, it is this responsibility that is pressed upon us to continue to tell these stories. So the role of the Black storyteller, it's critical, because we cannot allow them to erase what we have done in this country and the world, mind you, because Black history isn't just about what we've done here in the United States, but it's about what we've done all across this pale blue dot.
Man. Like, and when you really start to step out of the United States, like, just two examples top of my mind is one. I remember, actually, I need to do a little more research on this, but essentially, there's a black man who influenced the Russian language. Like, in Russia, a black man in Russia who had a positive influence, and he's celebrated in Russia for his achievements. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Another is right now there's a black owned electric car company that I just discovered on TikTok. Shout out to TikTok. And it's like oh, you could get this instead of the Tesla. Like there's people out here doing this, a black person. Then people in the comments like, well, yeah, maybe first in America, but we've been doing this over in Africa. So it's like, yo, when we start to look at a global, just the global impact is huge.
And
Um,
that's why, honestly, really, Walter, just really quickly, that's why when I started Black is America, or right before I started Black is American, I heard this Hollywood producer talk about every story that needed to be told has already been told. And I was like, that ain't true, because we need to hear these stories. We need to know and be reminded that we come from excellence, because there are plenty of people out there that want to tell us that we haven't. And so that is why we do shows like Black is America. That's why Nicole Hill does shows like Our Ancestors Are Messy. That's why Yanni Washington does shows like Harlem Queen in 1972, and all, and then you have Project 1619 and all these things. Like, it is pressed upon us to tell these stories. Like, it's not just for clicks and downloads. It's an obligation at this point.
mhm. Man, award-winning shows might we had. There's some
That's
pretty
fair.
good
That's fair.
shows out there
That's fair.
too.
That's fair.
Yeah,
But listen, that's what
great.
we do, isn't it? That is what we do in Black America, and in Black America, excellent is the standard. So
Absolutely. And speaking of excellence, I want to shout out a few people we got in here. Teresa Turner, thank you for joining us. And we got a legend in the building. Haven't had a chance to actually sit down and have a conversation with her, but we had exchanged a few messages. Keith O'Derrick, he's one of those people who's a lot of these moments in the culture. He's filmed a lot of them, and he just shared that he produced Black Aviation Museum, the men and women that paved the way for the Tuskegee Airmen.
love it.
Videos up on YouTube. Shout out to YouTube. Um, Not how heavy is it to take on that responsibility of being a storyteller?
It can be taxing, right? Because there are times where I'm writing the script, and keep in mind, I'm controlling the narrative arc, right? Not necessarily rewriting the story, but I'm controlling the narrative arc and how it's being fashioned, right? And Walter, full transparency, there are times I get angry. There are times I get sad. There are times I get inspired. There are times where I cry, and there's also times where it's like I can't believe, I'm about to tell this story. I told the story of Charles Jackson French. If you don't know, Charles Jackson French was a Navy man who was aboard a vessel. It was under attack by the Japanese, and the vessel he was on, was destroyed. Right, and so him and his shipmates, predominantly white, were all stranded at sea. So what he does, they found like a little raft or whatever. What he does is, through shark infested waters on this raft, being shot at by the Japanese, he takes a
Mm.
rope, ties it around his waist, ties it on the other end to this raft, and swims himself and everybody to safety for 8 hours while being shot at by the Japanese in shark infested waters. And it's like, I'm sitting here, I'm writing this
Something
story.
light.
Right. I'm writing this story, and I'm like, this ain't true. This is not true. But Navy documents say that it's absolutely true. And so it's taxing, right? But it's worth it when you hear, because Kenda, she's, education consultant, my wife. She plays sometimes episodes of Black as America in some of the classrooms that she works in from time to time. And when kids be like, did we really do that? And you just be like, yeah, we really did that. That's us,
Mm.
right? And so when you see that impact at that level, it just charges you like, we got to tell these stories. And so that weight, it's heavy, but it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I as you were talking, I was thinking of there was a video that went viral. It was a I believe a white man was talking to somebody in like the board of education.
Hmm.
He's a teacher talking to him, and he was had this call, a one-on-one call, because he was, struggling with like, curriculum for his classroom. This is in Florida. And he was like, I don't know whether or not I could say the word slave. Like we talked about this earlier, like, oh, they're calling something different. And she was advising him on how to talk about that period of time. And her advice was essentially leading him to not mention that these people were there against their will and things like that. And there's different, this kind of revisionist history going on, and there's like the parts that are like, super traumatic, that are never really fun to learn about, but it's the truth. But then also you take away, it's just everything's at danger. Just learning about things as simple as like I remember when learning that the super soaker was invented by a black man. Like I remember as a kid I was like, This thing on planet, like a
I know,
black,
right?
what
I know.
what?"
Because just around
Yeah.
here blasting people in the parking lot, and then realize we had a black innovation in our hand.
Home.
You know,
Right there.
right?
Things like, and then recently something I learned was that there was a man who maybe I learned this from you actually. You let me know, because I've been just consuming from so many different sources, because
No,
there's so many people who
for
are
sure.
telling these stories.
Yeah.
A person who we all know Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, right?
Hmm.
Incredible job. Shout out to him,
So
because I like having lights. I like being able to see. I would love to have night vision. Maybe we could have had that if we didn't. So I don't know. But
right.
anyways, he did that, changed the world. But years later, there was a black man who worked on the light bulb and made it more efficient and brighter and
Mhm.
shine the light longer as well. And
Right.
it's like, once again, innovation there. But those are things that, like, when we kind of take away things that are kind of called distractions, we take away just the kind of the respect that's there for the contributions. And then also just like that's the story that's bigger than just like, oh, a black person did that. That's a story of like, okay, someone did this, but someone else made it even better and kind of improved upon it. I think that's a beautiful thing about history. It's like someone did it first, and then
That's
who's doing it next. It's like we're learning about innovation, and that could teach us to continue to innovate, so that we're not stuck out here like yeah, a country that just like kind of stays stuck in the past.
and that is what we do. We tend to make a lot of things better, right? It's from the light bulb to the black woman inventing the security system, right? And Garrett A. Morgan and the protective mask, right? That was used in wartime and stuff like that. Like that is what we do. But I want to bring up something you said interesting about how how to present and saying the word slave and stuff like that. That's one of the things I've learned on this journey is not saying slaves, but the enslaved, right? Because slave tends to suggest an identity, and we are not that, right? We are not
Mm.
slaves. We were a people who were enslaved, right? And so that's why when we talk about Black is America, we talk about, it opens up with we come from heroes and royalty and things of that nature, because it's almost like reprogramming, right? And
Mm.
I get it, right? It's like we've been taught this language for years, right? And so it takes time, but like that's one of the things I've learned from Nicole Hannah Jones of Project 1619, that talking about enslaved as opposed to like calling our ancestors slaves and stuff like that. So it's a fascinating conversation for sure.
What's the beauty of talking to historians, y'all? Real time, accurate information, live
Listen,
in seconds.
it's one of those things where it's like not trying to make anybody feel bad. It's just like we're all learning. We're all on this journey together, right? We're all trying to improve, right? It's just like in mental health, we don't necessarily say commit suicide anymore. We say die by suicide, because to commit suicide seems just like that person wanted to do that, like you commit to a college. Like nobody wants to do that, right? So you say die by suicide. So at the end of the day, words matter. Words matter, and
Words
that's one
matter.
of the things that like we try to do in the podcasting world, is to try to be mindful of those words.
Man, we talking to an award-winning professional, y'all. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Shout out to Rob Humphrey joining in. Solid show, fellas. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you pulling up and being part of this conversation, y'all. If you're catching the replay of this, let me know and join in as well. I don't really do things just for people to hear me talk. I like to talk to people. I don't really like just talking to myself and everything. So I really want y'all to be a part of this too. Um, so storytelling right now, like I'm just loving like all the different ways. I feel like it's more accessible to share stories, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to wait until you get opportunity to speak on a TED stage or something like that, or to get recognized by the Smithsonian or something. You could literally, start a podcast. So I'd love to hear from you, just like talking about how storytelling is evolving today, because like, I mean, you could go from not knowing to knowing in an instant. You can go from not knowing to sharing with others in an instant. I'm loving it. So right now, the world of storytellers, like, what's the difference between storytelling now and storytelling back in the day?
So I think that and I'm not going to sit over and say that like we're doing something new and innovative. I think we're using our platforms, whether it be podcasting or YouTube or LinkedIn, to tell stories in new, innovative ways, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially when we talk about history, right? Um, there's this idea that like in 1956 this happened and this person was there, right? Like nobody's listening to that. Like that's kind of what you got in school, right? And so it's like, I want you to feel invested by the time John Fox calls military fire on himself in that tower. You're going to learn about his wife. You're going to learn about his daughter. You're going to learn about other alternative stories. You're getting even going to learn from the standpoint of different angles about John Fox, because I can tell the story of John Fox, and that's what we're learning now with these new age of storytellers. I can tell the story of John Fox linearly, or I can tell the story of John Fox where I began in the tower, give you a cliffhanger, and then start from the beginning. Because I remember when I first did the first 2 minutes of John Fox, and I was just sharing it with random people, like, "Hey, what do you think it is? You think this is okay?" And the number one question I got, like, "Where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it?" I was like, "Okay, so I guess we got something here, right?" But I think I say all of that to say that, like, especially when it comes to history, history is compelling. It is gripping. It is
Mhm.
emotional. It's not just dates and figures and sounds and this that, and the other. In the not the Tom Lee story, in the story of Doris Miller. Doris Miller is the Navy man who was a hero at Pearl Harbor and was firing on the Japanese, right? What many people don't know about Pearl Harbor, and it allowed me to tell this story. So Pearl Harbor happened what, December 7th, 1941, right? Can you guess, Walter? I give you one guess.
Oh
There's a
man.
very famous baseball player in American history and Black history that was on the island of Hawaii just 4 days before that.
4 days before that?
4 days before that. He's known as the first person
The
to
42?
correct.
Mr. He
Correct.
was oh.
So here's the story, right? Jackie Robinson had left UCLA, right? And because he needed money for the families and the other, so he moved to Hawaii to do some construction stuff and play semi-professional football, right? Because Jackie Robinson was just an all-star athlete, like lettered in just about every sport that he did, right? But he was getting homesick, right? And so there was this ship that was coming back and forth across the Pacific, and he had two dates to choose from. He could have left on December 3rd, or he could have left on January 2nd. And so I want you to, and this is one of the ways why we're able to teach history, because we get to do things like what if, right? Let's say he chooses the January 2nd date. What if he gets hurt at Pearl Harbor? What if he gets killed at Pearl Harbor? Does Major League Baseball get integrated a little bit later? Does it integrate at all?
Hmm.
Right? And so when you're able to tell stories like this, like the what ifs and the analytical piece of it, like that's a little bit more engaging than telling me facts, figures, stats, and all the things, right? Because many people I tell that Jackie Robinson are like, damn, I didn't know that,
I had
right?
no idea.
Yeah, like Jackie Robinson was in Hawaii just a few days before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And so again, that is why history is so important, because all it takes is one, and all it takes is somebody getting homesick, and it literally changes the
Mhm.
course of history, right? And so when you present stories and history like that is how you're able to get people on board and emotionally invested in all those things, because I'm all about the angles when it comes to my storytelling. Either A, I'm gonna share with you a story you never heard before, or B, if you've heard the story before, I'm going to present it in a way that's a little different, right? And if you're able to do both, that's award-winning content.
Award man, award winning. Y'all, I need everyone to go listen to an episode because like the last one I listened to was the one around the black quarterbacks, and
Mhm.
that one I found myself going, oh wow, oh what, and then laughing at certain points, and like it's just incredibly produced. And what I love even more about it is so one podcast always like hold up as examples like this how you podcast is a show from Guy Raz how I built this
Mhm.
because I like it's an interview style show and I like it just because he's well researched and he understands the guests. And like the stuff that he knows, I mean, he might have been coached beforehand, whatever, but the research team is doing the research and they're doing it well. When I listen to your podcast, it sounds like there's 10 different people doing the research on this. I
I,
think it's just one person wearing 10 different hats.
yeah, pretty
Man,
much. Yeah.
writer, researcher, producer, host, promoter, social media manager, audio editor, engineer, all the things, all the things. What so tell me a little bit about like what it takes to really like put together these stories because I think we're going to talk about kind of protecting the culture next, but like
Yeah.
this is I don't want to give you your flowers, man. Like I know you're dope, and the world knows you dope because you've been winning awards. But do they know like what it takes? The real reason why he's winning awards is like the time he's putting into this well crafted show.
Honestly, it's I appreciate that, and I receive all of that. It, it's I do most of the work now. Like there's Kendra, my wife, who gets in and kind of fact checks certain things, or at the very least, like, hey, maybe say it this way or something like that. But when it comes to the research, that's where the magic is. It's in the research and going through not just like going to Wikipedia, but going deeper than that, right? We're talking about getting a newspapers.com account and diving into those archives, into the Baltimore American and the old New York Times from 1943, into the LA Times for back in the day, right? Because one of the things I've noticed is that, like, you could get the broad scope of the story, right, from like the big publications, but when you go to those local newspapers, that's where you get the little nuggets that the national media, as they say,
Mhm.
you're not going to get, right? So it goes. First of all, I get interested in a story, and I think of, and one of the rules I have is that if I hear a story and I start writing it in my head, it's pretty much like that's the direction I'm going to go. And so then I go into the character development. And so, even though these are actual people that lived on this earth, there's still questions. So, for instance, the Wendell Scott, the first black person to be in the NASCAR, right? Had a phenomenal career considering all the things that he had, right? I could just tell you, could just learn about Wendell Scott, but where did he grow up? He grew up in Danville, Virginia. What's Danville known for? Danville actually used to be the capital of the Confederacy when Richmond fell. And so you go into these different little kind of rabbit holes, if you will, just on the character alone, right? And then also just be curious and ask those questions, right? So research usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and then we're writing the episode, right? And making sure that everything is connected in piece. And one of the things that we like to do with Black is America's, right? Even though the episode is about Wendell Scott, you're going to learn about so much more than just Wendell Scott. Yes, the title episode is about John Fox, but you're going to learn about so much more than John Fox. Yes, the episode is about Ann Lowe, but you're going to learn so much more than just Ann Lowe. And so being able to connect those dots is important. And I'll say this and land my plane. I think one of the things that's unfortunate in a lot of school systems is that history is taught linearly, right?
Mhm.
It's only this person at this time doing these things. But I just shared with you not too long ago that both Jackie Robinson and Pearl Harbor happened in the same universe and very close to each other, right?
Right.
And so, again, when you're able to connect the dots when it comes to history, that's more compelling, right? That's a little bit more like, huh, I didn't, I didn't know that, right? And so, do the research, do the writing, then we do the voiceover, right? I do like a table read. So before I write it, and then I go through the script, right? And I read it and do the voiceover as if I'm recording it, even though I'm not. And then from there, like, I don't like how that came out of my mouth. That feels like a word jumble. Let's rewrite that piece, right? And then rewrite it, record it, edit it, sound design, all the things, get my archival content, and then boom, bam, bam, Webby Award winning pieces come out.
I got questions, but I'm not gonna ask them because you just gave so many nuggets, and you almost gave away this. I think you gave away like the ingredients to the sauce. But you didn't take just like how long do we need to cook the tomato down, so it's like this nice puree. So I'm like, we're gonna stop there. So we put a course together, put in the Black Podcasters Association. Shout out to Corey Guns, Black
Absolutely.
Podcast Association, and Black Pod News. Y'all want more? Go there. Um, all right. Round of applause, y'all. This is what I'm talking about, right? Like, just stories are everywhere, and just the importance of them and how it all relates to protecting the culture.
Absolutely.
I
And
did,
can I share something really quickly? Because
yeah.
and that is how, just from a podcasting standpoint, when you're able to lean into the creativity and able to do that work, that's how you're able to beat competition that is more well funded, more well known, and all those things. Because
Mm.
when you won that Webby, ESPN was in that category. And so who
ESPN, Entertainment Sports, something network.
that is them, the one you know and love. Who handed them an L? That would be Dominic.
Ooh,
Little old Dominic with the budget of a Wendy's 4 for $4.
the Lawson L.
Handed them an L, exactly.
Mm,
So
man.
again, anybody can be beat. Anybody can be beat. So it's just one of those things where, like, do you have the fortitude to push through when it gets tough? So I just wanted to get on that podcasting. Soapbox real quick.
Yo, if y'all want to stand a chance in the awards season next year, it sounds like you just gotta hire Dominic. I don't know if I don't think he's for sale, but I think you could book some time with him. He's a busy man. Man, shout out to you once again.
Appreciate it.
Um, so protecting the culture.
Absolutely.
Years ago I did an episode called Who Owns Juneteenth? And it was around the time that Juneteenth became a federally recognized holiday,
Mm,
something that had been celebrated within the culture for centuries,
mm,
especially shout out to Texas because when we all
correct.
started celebrating Texas, like make sure y'all doing it right. It's our holiday. We the we the
Right.
architects of this, and shout out to them. But yeah, it became a federal holiday, which means that everyone had a chance to take part of it, which I have mixed feelings about. I'm not gonna lie, but I do love that everyone's recognizing, um, the culture once again in our history. Now,
Absolutely.
a lot of things happened during that time, right? Like one, I remember in Greenville, South Carolina. South Carolina is my home state. There were some Juneteenth celebration flags that went up. Depicted on them were white families. Questionable. They wanted to make sure it was inclusive. Very funny. Shout out to DEI.
Mm,
And
absolutely. Shout out to DEI.
Shout out to
Absolutely.
DEI, which I do love, by the way. I know a lot. Well, but I'm going to say that for another conversation. I'm going to have some actual DEI practitioners come in and talk about the role and impact and whether or not it actually is beneficial for Black America. But more
Important
on that later.
Very
Say what?
important. Very important conversation because
Yeah,
I have questions.
we all got questions. They got answers. I
Right.
will say, I think it's good to always critique things that are there to progress society and um
1000%.
yeah, so we're gonna get to critiquing. Let me know in the chat if y'all want to see that episode live or on demand. But yeah, we did that episode, and the thing that really inspired me was that Juneteenth ice cream that was put out
Mhm.
in collaboration with Great Value. There was an actual trademark that was filed to own the word Juneteenth. Now, what that would do would allow them to use it for commercial purposes and also allow them to prevent other people from using it. Trademarks are very, very powerful. There's huge corporations that are in the candle making business that have acquired trademarks for things like autumn fall or different like
Mhm.
words that
Mhm.
you would think shouldn't be trademarked, but they do, and they prevent small businesses from being able to sell their candles because it's like, no, we own that word. You can't call it that.
Right.
It goes deep, and so when that they withdrew their application for the trademark because of all the backlash they were getting. But it just made me think like, okay, that was the not the first attempt, but the latest attempt to own a piece of the culture and to monetize it. And as a community, I'm not saying we suck at this, but I'm saying we're now in a position where we could take certain matters into our hand to own certain parts of our culture. But if we don't kind of do it intentionally, it's going to be up for grabs, up for sale. Um, and right now, these next 4 years is going to be a lot of owning and erasing and deprioritizing moments of our culture and kind of using our own people to do it as well.
Right.
So this is why another reason why I really really love what you're doing because it kind of is it's keeping these stories alive and putting an importance on them and just kind of letting people know doing it on a stage where everyone can see like you won awards everyone's gonna has to recognize the show Black as America. But I'm curious from your perspective
Yeah.
when it comes to telling stories and protecting the culture, like what is it that we can kind of start doing, like what's the role of storytellers when it comes to protecting our community.
I think when we share these stories, it's a purpose, right? And a lot of times, these, I mean, first of all, we want you to feel affirmed when you hear these stories that we share, right? And I say we in the collective sense of like all storytellers across different platforms and stuff like that. But also, even if the storyteller doesn't give you a call to action, see if you can create one for yourself, because like that's where the revolution happens. That's where the change happens. That's where the again that piece we talked about earlier. You don't have to be a great orator. You don't have to be a baseball player. You don't have to be this thing. You can be this everyday person, non-celebrity status, and still make a difference, right? Um, And it's also important to share these stories, right? And I don't mean that from the standpoint so like somebody can get more clicks and likes and follows and downloads. I mean, so people can understand that like you come from something amazing, no matter what people want to tell you and try to rewrite it because again, they are rewriting these books, and the reason they're able to do that because Texas, I don't know if you noticed or not, is the largest state that purchases textbooks, right? And so they kind of get to dictate what goes in them for the rest of the
Mm,
country almost, right? And so when you have that at that level, is like it's so important now more than ever to continue to do these things. So follow the call to action in these stories. If there isn't a call to action, see if you can create one for you and your family, but also share these stories. Keep continuing to share these stories. Even if you don't hit the share button, tell these stories to your families. Tell these stories to your kids. And maybe they may not get it right now. Like they're teenagers, they're over it and, and they ain't gonna get it right now. But 20 years from now, when they have kids and stuff like that, they're gonna come back like, you know what, mom, dad, I remember that story you told me from Black is America. And I wasn't really trying to feel it at that time, but it was stuck there. But now that I have a family, now that I have, you know, kids and stuff like that, I'm grateful for you telling me that story. Now I need to share it with them because it's the legacy piece for me. It's the legacy
mm.
piece, right? And so when we don't tell these stories and share these stories, a piece of our legacy gets lost. It's like it's already we already get kind of got stripped from it when we came, in this country, the way that we did on that free cruise that we got that we didn't ask for, right? And I remember, and Paula's in the audience, and I've shared this with Paula, and I've shared this publicly. But like when we were at Afros and Audio, and they had that all African panel,
Mm.
there was a part of me that felt wonderful and happy for them to have this moment and learning from them. But also there was a part of me that was a bit jealous because they have that experience. And I know eventually I'll have the chance to go back to Africa and put my hands in the sand and put my feet on the ground there. But think about this, Walter. For tens of millions of Black Americans, they won't be able to have that. Like you will never have that connection to the home continent, and that kind of hurts.
Absolutely.
That
We
kind of
got Raven Simone out here being like I ain't African American, I'm just American. I don't know
yes.
Africa. And
You
it's
see what I'm
like,
saying? Like,
yeah.
and listen, you know, I don't know why she couldn't, see with her Raven's eye that like that how problematic that is. But listen, let Raven do Raven. But for the rest of us, like that bothers me that there's going to be tens of millions of Americans, Black Americans, that's not going to be able to feel what it's going to be like to be in the home in the motherland, right? And so that is why we have to tell these stories because every day there's somebody working against us to take these stories from us. And so we as storytellers have to stand in the gap. We have to stand.
Mm, that's true. And hey, if it's that important to them to not have these stories shared, I mean, there's something there.
Right.
There's something there.
There it is. There it is.
Man. So we've talked a lot about oh man, shout out to Paula. She said she could carry us all to Tanzania with me.
Man.
Oh, I thought you're gonna tell us how you're going to, but you're laughing right now. You're laughing. We're trying to go. We're
Right.
trying to
Like
go
we,
and
we,
you
we are
laughing.
like actually trying to go.
Yeah, shout out
Like,
to Paula.
listen, and speaking of Paula, she just reminded me, like, and Walter, you know this. That's why anytime I see a Nando's, I'm stuffing my face with it. Like I feel like there's something subconscious within me that is yearning for the home continent, right?
Y'all, whoever can get in touch with Nando's, tell them to go sponsor Dominic because
Listen, you won't get a bigger cheerleader for Nando's than me.
man, shout out. I will say I experienced it after he was hyping it up for a year, and I'm like, I get it.
It's
I
so good.
get it. That was good. That was good. Um, so we talked about storytelling, protecting our culture,
Yeah,
but you're working on something else which is fascinating. It's really
absolutely.
interesting. I'm also very curious about what the final result's going to look like. But earlier you were talking about mental health, right? And the
Yeah,
whole language matters. And Teresa made this comment. I want to bring it back up. You were talking about the word being intentional about words, like instead of saying committed suicide. It's like,
Right.
well, actually, what was the word? What would you
Die by suicide.
died by suicide?
What we
Sh-
try to
Uh,
say now. Yeah.
Okay. So she said, the suicide comment resonated. Love the direction. Lost a friend in mental health rehabilitation industry. By suicide terms matter. Definitions associated with them matter more. Um,
Because if I may, because first of all, my condolences, Teresa, because that person that died by suicide is a whole person. It's a whole person. And when we talk about suicide in that matter, it's like, for unfortunately, that is what they'll be remembered as the person who died by suicide.
mhm,
And so we have to flip that narrative of of celebrating the whole person. Like, this person had a bad moment. They had a bad moment, not a bad life. I don't know all the details, but like, they had a bad moment, and that moment is now defining who they were as a person. I just fail to believe that that's who that person was, and so that's why it's important. You know, that's why it's important to get the language right as much as possible. Like, listen, sometimes I slip up and say, whatever, right? But I think
mhm.
intention is to always try to be mindful of that whole person, and to remember that whole person. So again, Teresa, my condolences for sure.
Absolutely. Condolences. And thanks for sharing as well, Teresa. Um, so mental health, right?
Yeah,
We're now at a time where it's a lot more common. I have friends who will talk about like, oh, I can't do I got a therapy appointment.
I
That's
love it.
normalized now. For a lot of people, it's still a lot of taboo. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's like the way it's looked at now compared to back then, night and day.
Listen,
And
a lot of progress being made on that front.
a lot of progress, right?
Yeah,
Now, when we think about mental health and culture, the two go hand in hand. We're learning about history that's literally traumatic, and we know that trauma is something that can be passed down through generations. Now, something that like I learned, what I just started thinking of as I was preparing for this live is like I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, a city that does a lot to preserve history, a certain perspective of history, but they also will just like you could see where everything happened in that city. And something else is really interesting is what they do to keep it going because it's a lot of old buildings and everything, and they try to keep it preserved so it's always there. But they do little things to kind of heal and protect it, right? They kind of have things where there's cracks, so kind of fix it in a way that doesn't take away from what the culture is. They have certain things where floods come in, they have certain barriers in place. So it's still there. You don't notice it fully, but it's still there. And I think our culture is a really beautiful thing, but it's also something that in order to protect it, we got to heal in a lot of ways as well.
yeah,
Um, it's like recovery and healing is going to be, I think, part of what allows us to continue to exist as ourselves, and something that you're working on now with the podcast Mental Health Rewritten. I'm so excited for it because it's like you're taking all the things that you've done in history and bringing it over, like the way you can make people feel and the stories you could tell with history, now applying that to these mental health conversations. And I already know I'm not even going to be ready for the podcast, but it's needed. It's needed. I've yet to book my therapy appointment, y'all. In 2025, I'm just reached over 30, and I'm now starting to realize like how important it is for me to actually go get some therapy, just so I can just be a better version of me. But can you tell us like what this podcast is and why you felt it was important for you to pursue?
um, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. As you know, Walter, many people may not know, but I used to work at a behavioral health organization for the past 3 years, Meadows Behavioral Healthcare, and I still do some contract work with them from time to time. I'm actually speaking at a Meadows event in a few weeks, in April, actually.
Hmm.
And
Are they
so,
a part of this podcast?
no,
Hmm.
no, no, they
Hmm.
should be, but they're not. Uh,
Hey, Meadows. I gotta
listen.
hit them up, man.
Listen, like, hey, we'll see, we'll see.
Okay.
They do like they do like the show. They do like the show. I do know that. But no, but I left the Meadows May of 2024, and one of the things that I told myself that like the work continues, the work continues. Um, and so Mental Health Rewritten is a brand new show that I'm launching in May 14th of this year. And so one of the things we want to do is kind of what you were talking about earlier. We need to fight through the guilt and the shame and the tabooness and the stigmas and all the things, right? Because there's still a lot of people out there hurting, Walter. They really are. You know, there are a lot of people who feel like therapy is a gimmick. There's a lot of people who like to, believe that like some of the things that's going on with them only affects them, um, not realizing that it affects family, co-workers, loved ones, this, that, and the other, right? And there's a lot of people who feel as if nobody can relate to my situation. There's that isolation. One of the things we know in the behavioral health, mental health world is that isolation, unfortunately, fuels addiction, right? Because
Mm.
you're off to yourself and you feel like nobody can relate to me. And so with Mental Health Rewritten, we want to combat those stigmas and those shames with these narratives and these human stories, if you will. So one of the uniqueness the uniqueness of Mental Health Rewritten is that it uses a what I like to call a 312 format. So
Mm.
basically, three topic tracks across a 12 episode arc, and each one of those tracks tackles different sectors. So in season one, we go right out the gate. The first track is about sex addiction, pornography, sexual assault and trauma, and sexual anorexia, which is something that not people realize is an actual thing.
Mm.
And that second track is about suicide. Talking with people who have had that ideation, talking with people who have lost someone who has died by suicide, and also some other critical factors of like people in who we've had athletes who have died by suicide. We have had people who are high power CEOs who have died by suicide. We've unfortunately had a lot of maternity suicide, if you will, right? And so we need to have these conversations. And that last track is what I like to call the cultural identity track. And so we're going to come out and talk about racial trauma. It is a real thing, right? And then we talk about mental health challenges and perspectives in the Latino community, and also in the Asian American community, and also in the Jewish community as well. I have a woman whose grandmother fled Nazi Germany, moved to Ohio. Then somebody got a job, moved down to Georgia, and had crosses burned in their yard because they wanted to help with the civil rights movement. And so that is trauma. You can't just pray away. And I don't mean any disrespect to like any religious people listening, but we got to work. There's some work through that.
Mm.
And so that is Mental Health Rewritten. It's one of those things where we're trying to save lives. We're trying to save lives. And so one of the most impactful things that happened at the Meadows, and I'll land my plane, is I did an episode about sex addiction, interviewed somebody, and I had left the company, and somebody called me a few weeks later. Hey, Dominic, do you realize that episode that you did about sex addiction? That somebody listened to that episode, called us, and checked themselves into treatment. And so
Mm.
when you hear stories like that, Walter, like you realize like, no, the work's not done. The work's not done. There are so many people out there that are wanting help, needing help, looking for help, asking for help, pleading for help, right? And for some, podcasting is that path to help. And so if I can use my skill set as a podcaster and a researcher to help humanize some of these challenges and disorders, and they can go get help, even if it's just a 12-step meeting, even if it's just you call or dial or text 988, which is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's completely free, right? Go to lifeline.org if you want to have more information about that. Uh, listen, the work's not done, and so we're trying to save lives. We're trying to save lives. And as you can see, I'm very passionate about
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
it's like when you man when you hear these stories, you just be like, they're heartbreaking from time to time. But even though they're heartbreaking stories, there's always hope. There's always hope, and there's always a path, and there's
hmm.
multiple paths, and everybody's path doesn't look the same.
What is you said there's always hope. What does hope look like?
Hope looks like talking to somebody. Hope looks like, being able to reconnect with your family. Hope looks like being able to get maybe you lost a career and you get a second career, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about grief, a lot of times people think that grief is a thing where you lost somebody. It could be the loss of a job. It can be the loss of the way things were. It can be the loss of your youth. It can be a loss of many things. And so, again, hope can look like many different ways. Hope can look like a 12-step meeting. Hope can look like dial or text 988. Hope can be a plethora of things. It just depends on what that person is looking for. And so, listen, man, we use some of the top clinicians in the country, and they have these conversations with me in a narrative format. And so I'm really proud of the work. I'm really
Hmm.
proud of the work because again, I'm trying to save lives, man. I'm trying to save lives,
Trying
and
to
if I
save
can
lives.
if I can do that with podcasting, then so be it. That's as we say in the South, that's my ministry, I guess. That's my
Man,
ministry. So
it's really cool that you already have just um proof, I guess, of how podcasting can end up saving lives. Like literally seeing the process of tracking someone from listening to checking in for help. So one, it's just really cool that pairing between this podcast and or that podcast in which you're doing the work with the Meadows.
yeah,
Really dope, powerful partnership there. And
absolutely.
then also just the work you're doing now. Yeah, it's like what something you said earlier, right? When talking about Black history and your kids, like, they might not listen now, but years later, it'll be something they can call back to. That's
Right.
absolutely true. The work you're doing now has a ripple effects.
Absolutely.
And
And it's
one of
evergreen, right? Like because
yeah.
and these mental health challenges and disorders, they're not just gonna just go away in a generation, right? Unfortunately, these things are going to continue to happen. So we need to have the resources and tool, especially now, seeing as that the awareness is becoming more and more
Mhm.
out there. It's important to have these conversations, but also, Walter, if I may, and I'll be really quickly about this. There's awareness, but unfortunately also there's harming information because now, unfortunately, while we do want people to be aware of trauma gets loosely thrown out there now. Like everything is
Mhm.
traumatizing, right? Narcissism gets thrown out there a lot now, especially in a lot of like, TikToks and relationship stuff and stuff like that. And so we want to, with mental health rewritten, do this in a very responsible way, which is why we have these behavioral health clinicians helping us tell these stories.
Hmm. So it's I guess how does that work for things like trauma, which yeah, it's being used all the times in joking ways, playful ways, but it's like
Mhm.
that's a serious thing. So like what is it that I guess how do you approach this like carefully? Like what's like this kind of safeguards thing you got to watch out for?
No, for sure. So, for one of the things that we do in mental health rewritten, for one, I have an executive producer who is is a behavioral health professional who checks the episodes to make sure, Dominic, let's reword that before
Hmm.
we send that out there. So there's that. So to hold me accountable because I'm not a clinician, right? But also one of the things that we do with mental health rewritten is that we use two books that clinicians use. The one is the DSM-5 or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders that's used here in the United States that is used to diagnose mental health disorders. And so one of the things we do is, okay, you want to talk about trauma? This is how trauma is defined. This is how it diagnosed. This is why this distinction matters, right? And so it's up, and so that way, maybe with that armed with that information, it won't be loosely thrown out there, right? Because again, what did we say earlier? Words matter, do they not? Like the words we use, the language we use matters. So you can't just be saying, "Oh, I was so traumatized, and maybe you were. I'm not going to sit up here and say that you weren't. I'm not here to color somebody's experience, but there's responsibility that comes with those words, and so you can't just loosely throw them out there. Just like when I tell podcasters, responsibility comes with that microphone.
Mm.
You got to make sure you try to get it right as much as possible.
I think podcasters should be more accountable for things they say on the mic during recording.
Man,
That's
listen,
odd. That's
come,
weird.
come
That's
on.
weird. Chill now.
Listen,
Chill, 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 chill.
you, for some, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, there's a certain level of screen and uh, mic credibility that's afforded to you when you're on the screen and when you have a microphone, right? It's almost like just because that person is on a screen, they are credible, and that's not always true,
Mhm.
right? And so if that is happening, then I impress on podcasters and storytellers to as much as humanly possible to get it right. I'm not
Mhm.
expecting you to get it right all the time, but try to put some checks and balances in there. Also, even invite the audience, like, hey, Dominic, I think you might have misspoke. Could you reword this or add a note in the show notes that says XYZ? Absolutely. Absolutely. Not a problem.
Mm.
So there's a responsibility that comes with that microphone.
Absolutely. Really want to check in with the chat. Appreciate y'all joining in live. One, Teresa went on to share just a little bit more about the friend that she lost. Trailblazer worked at Cornell University. So I know that a
Again,
lot of
a
lives were
whole
touched by
person,
that.
a whole person,
Whole
a
person.
whole person, not just somebody who died by suicide, a whole person, a trailblazer, taught at an Ivy League school. That a whole person, a whole person. Thank you, Teresa, for sharing that with us. I wanted to say that.
Hmm. We got a few other people who joined, and just like to celebrate everyone who joins in on the conversation. Appreciate you joining. It's good for individuals to know their history. Thank you, and thank you, Marine Perry Rose. Let me know if I pronounced that name correctly. Check me. I love to learn. Love to get accurate information. Paula shared a little bit about the podcast. Got a glimpse. It was feeling seen. Now can imagine what the rest of it looks like. She went on to share a little bit more about
So grateful.
um
So
just her
grateful.
experiences with her own addiction and just how these conversations are making her feel like seen or spoken to. So I think like the ripple effects that you're having with this podcast is incredible. The Marcus Akeem Suggs joining to say, preach. Love the storytelling element that you're bringing to these subjects. It helps to keep the meaning behind the words that start to get diluted in our day to day. Hashtag words matter. Y'all, if you take one thing away from this, is just like the intentionality behind the things that we do. It might not mean anything to you, but it has an impact on everyone who's you're surrounded by. Last question, y'all, because we're going over, and I feel like I'm gonna have to
My bad.
start
I
the
be talking too much.
no, no, no. It's my pleasure. I'm just like you told me it takes, you put 2 weeks into research time. Time is very precious. I'm learning more as I'm running out of it. I don't want to take a second more of yours so that you could go back to doing the great things that you're doing
I
in this
appreciate that.
world and also for your family and everything. Last question for you though.
Yeah.
Well, I've been hiding with my locks. The
Hey,
great reveal. Y'all seen it before. Y'all seen it before.
hey, I love it.
Yeah,
Love
self-made,
that
nah, nah,
shit.
nah. We going to me. I'm fine with my hair right now. Yeah.
It's some beautiful locks, sir.
Well, thank
Listen,
you.
listen,
Thank
listen,
you.
listen. It's some beautiful locks, sir.
Right? The stories that these locks tell. Community made, not self-made. I'm on this not really mission to be honest, but honestly, every time I see someone yelling out self-made, I'm like, that's pretty cool, but that's not accurate at all.
Not
There's
even-
always community there. Even if there was no one shooting in the gym with you, there's people who are there supporting what you're doing. You just
right.
might not know them.
Somebody got that bar off their chest when they got too heavy.
Yup.
Listen,
Yup, you might not know them,
listen,
but they came through.
listen. They came through in the clutch.
Yeah. So my question to you is,
Yes, sir.
how has your community shown up for you?
My community is everything. My 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 community is everything. From I'll start from number one ranked person in it. My wife. Listen, heard me say hours and hours of these stories, and I'm gonna do this in podcast, I'm gonna do this in podcast, and they're saying, "Oh, okay, is that what you're gonna do?" In typical black woman fashion. All right, what's the plan? How are we gonna do it? All right, well, listen, I'm gonna go grab this. You do that, and I'll meet you in an hour. We're gonna do it together, right? So, number one rank plan, but also, man, like, listen, the BPA and Afros and Audio, my homies in the IHOP Breakfast Club, Walter Gaynor and CW Jr. and Paula and stuff like that, man. Like, you guys give me life. You guys give me life. You let me work out through stuff. You hold me accountable. You tell me stop whining from time to time. Uh,
Never that.
it's important, but also my guys in the UMA collective, Mr. Al Pete, Sean Smith, Crate Digger, Tyronza, like those guys, like all you, like I, Dominic is not where he is without my community. It ain't even close. It ain't fathomable. It ain't none of that stuff, man. So you right, man. Like nobody builds something by themselves. Like Rise build stuff by herself, man. And so my community has been everything to me, and which is why I try my best, uh, very often to pour back and put back in the pot that I take out. I definitely try to put back in the pot that I take out.
Man, we got to. That's how we got here. That's how we're gonna continue to grow.
1,000%.
I was gonna say like the only person who had did was Tony Stark in the Caves in Iron Man 1, but one fictional character in 2, he actually did have somebody with him. The
He
person just
did.
died.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
Yes,
people
he
forgot
did.
about
He
that.
wasn't by himself.
Nobody does it alone.
Right.
Um, Appreciate all of y'all joining in on this conversation.
Appreciate you.
There are so many different ways we could take this conversation when it comes to protected culture. I don't think there's one angle to take. So we're going to continue to have these convos with different people who are playing the role because we all got a role to play. Thank you for joining this live. You're catching the replay. Keep the conversation going. It does not end here. Also, if there's somebody that you want to see me speak to, let me know. Put them in the comments. DM me. Let me know who they are and why, and I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate your time, Dominic. Make sure y'all are following Dominic on everything. His podcast, Black is America, out now. These are the replay value is very strong. So you think you know somebody, go back and check it out. Anyways, new show coming out May 14th. You said
May 14th,
May 14th.
just in time for Mental Health Awareness Month.
Hey, timing. This guy's a professional. Award-winning
Intentionality, sir.
producer.
Intentionality, sir.
That's what I'm talking about.
Intentionality.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, Dominic Lawson, the real Dominic Lawson on Instagram, Dominic Lawson on LinkedIn. Where else can people follow you, find you, support you?
Those are the big ones, for sure. Definitely check out the shows. Black is America, Ambia nominated this year. Also, the B Word, my wife, also Ambie nominated this year. Both of those shows Ambie nominated in the same category. So,
Hey,
the same category. So we're gonna be a little.
Lawson family taking something home.
I'm leaving here with something.
All right.
Leaving here with something. I'm from around the way. I'm leaving here with something. But
Y'all.
yeah, you can follow all those shows on any major podcast platform. Obviously, Mental Health Rewritten comes out this May. Can't wait. Can I shout out two people I see in the live here? Um,
Yeah.
Demarcus Suggs, Akeem Suggs. He actually works under the mayor's administration here in Memphis, and helping and supporting creatives. And so I just want to make sure to shout him out as well here on this live. And also, a good friend Mark, man. Mark Ronnick's in the building. Look at
Mark
that.
Ron's in the
Mark
building.
Ronnick's in the building, man.
What's
Shout out.
up, Mark?
Absolutely. Shout out to Empower Podcasting and all the people and all the stuff. So definitely want to make sure to shout him out too, man.
Absolutely. You said Demarcus Suggs?
DeMarcus Akeem Suggs. Yeah. Like,
Suggs? Yo, special shout out to you and everyone else working for the government right now. What a
absolutely.
time, what a time. History's being made real time. Keep doing your thing. Appreciate all that you do. And yeah, that big shout out to y'all. Yeah, thank you all once again for joining. This is a special live edition, Black History Month, Work More Black show, career growth and entrepreneurship resources and stories highlighting Black leaders like Dominic Lawson right here doing some important things, impactful things, and or leaders that should be recognized. There's lots of lessons we can learn from their journey. We're gonna go because I could feel myself starting a whole new conversation, but we got to go. It's getting late.
We'll run it back later this year. How about that? We
We'll
run it
run
back
it
later this
back
year.
around May
All right,
after the second episode is dropped.
that's
We'll
cool.
run it back.
Let's do it.
Yes. All right, y'all. Thank you. Enjoy y'all. And peace.